Welcome, jury. I'm Denis Marshall, prosecutor of Hendershot, Marshall and Associates. And we now call a woman healed by Jesus on the Sabbath. We will call her woman in keeping with contemporary beliefs that women were non-persons, only slightly more valuable than animals. Why Jesus showed such concern for them we'll leave to your reflection. It is purported that a spirit of weakness caused her to be bent double for 18 years. Then Jesus grasped her and told her to straighten up, which she did. This was followed by a heated exchange between Jesus and a religious leader, not because Jesus had healed a woman, but because he had broken the Sabbath law. Do I have the basic elements correct, woman?
Yes, I was in a terrible painful condition for 18 years. Jesus not only made it possible for me to stand up, he also relieved all of my pain. It was truly a miracle.
Yes, well, I'm sure we're all glad that you can be a productive member of society, but the miraculous nature of your so-called cure is not the point of this interrogation. Now let's focus.
But you must understand how important this was to me. You speak of focus. Try to imagine what my life was like. Always bent over, always looking down. It was hard to do anything, even carry on a simple conversation. And it would have been embarrassing enough to be seen that way. But it hurt even more knowing people felt I was punished by God, or some sin, or that an evil spirit was behind it all. Oh, the pain was constant. But what worse than then? The muscle when it spasms. I always feared I would lose my balance and fall. Even at night, in bed, I had trouble finding a comfortable position in which to sleep. I would have done anything for a cure. Anything. I prayed constantly. But as it turned out, I didn't even so much as have to ask Jesus. He saw me. He pitied me. He healed me right in the synagogue.
And that fact is something we want to be very clear about. Now, let's make sure that you have these facts straight. You were in the synagogue on the Sabbath, fulfilling your religious obligation. And Jesus came up to you out of the blue, and you didn't go there for healing. You didn't ask him to do what he did.
No, I worshiped every Sabbath. I had my own place back by the door. Most of us, healthy or crippled, have our preferred places. I will say I had heard that Jesus would be there, about his teachings, so I was looking forward to this Sabbath. And I always prayed to God for healing. But being a woman, I didn't expect God's special attention. I would never have expected Jesus' attention, much less a miracle. The men aren't supposed to notice the women. That's why we are separated.
Well, then what? As a woman, did you make a noise or have a spasm to catch his attention?
No, I did nothing. And being in the back, hidden by the crowd, I don't even know how he saw me. But he did. Suddenly he abandoned his teaching and called, "Woman, come forward." I didn't realize he was speaking to me. Then I realized people were looking at me and moving aside to make a path for me. I was afraid I'd done something wrong, but when I got there and twisted my head to see him, his compassion dispelled my fears.
I'm sure it was a wonderful moment. But please go on.
There isn't much more. He said, "Woman, you are set free of your infirmity." He put his hands on my upper arms and raised me up. And that was that. I was as straight and as strong as I had been 18 years earlier. I praised God. I thanked him for answering my prayers.
And yet, you must have heard the synagogue leader's reaction.
Oh, I heard him all right. Every word. I expect everyone in town heard him. He turned on the crowd first, including me, I guess, though he knew I didn't ask to be healed. He reminded us that the law says people are to work on the other 6 days, so we were wrong to be here on the Sabbath, hoping Jesus would heal us. But even though he said it to us, I think he was really criticizing Jesus.
Oh, well, now we finally come to the point of this testimony. This Jesus is charged with ignoring both religious custom and the law. Remember the Sabbath day to keep it holy. 6 days you shall labor and do all your work, but the seventh day is Sabbath to the Lord your God. On it you shall do no work of any kind. This was not merely a human rule. This was God's law. Religious leaders since the days of Moses had further defined it. Traditions have grown up around it to help us properly obey this commandment. What Jesus did and what incited him to do it by your mere presence was a violation of God's law. It clearly proves that the charges against Christ are valid.
But Jesus cited the very exception that scribes had always allowed.
Even though your testimony proves the validity of the charges, I suppose we can hear Jesus' excuses for his lawbreaking.
First of all, he called his accusers hypocrites. Then he pointed out an exception that they themselves allowed, watering their livestock on the Sabbath. I'm not sure how I feel being compared to a donkey or an ox, but oh well. He more than made up with it with his next statement. I guess you'd call it a rhetorical question. He said, "Then should not this woman, a daughter of Abraham, who Satan has kept bound for 18 long years, be set free on the Sabbath from what has bound her?" Imagine that. Set free from a crippling condition and called Abraham a daughter of Abraham, all in the same day. No one has referred to a woman as daughters of Abraham. So Jesus not only set me free from my physical disability, he freed me from untold ages of being considered unworthy because I am a woman. Everyone rejoiced in Jesus' actions and words, except the religious leaders, of course. Being bested in an argument and having their own laws used against them was downright humiliating.
Yes, well, that's why we're interested in the law in this case. Freedom can turn to license all too easily. Just look at life today. Stores are open on the Sabbath. People choose to sleep in or skip church. All kinds of strange, non-traditional forms of worship are being introduced. Even if people come to church, they seem to think the rest of the day is for their own pleasure. We must convict this Christ. He started it all.
Don't you see? Christ doesn't mean for the Sabbath to go unobserved. He freed us from tradition for tradition's sake. He doesn't care what music or format we use. He frees us so that we can worship God with joy and excitement. I think that's why he chose to heal me on the Sabbath day. Because I was bound by more than my disability or even an evil spirit. I was bound by the law and my societies. A male-dominated society's use of it. He set me free, set us all free to worship with our whole hearts. In the end, he gave even his life that we might have the kind of freedom to love and praise God with new free selves, which makes me want to worship him all the more.
You've given the jury much to consider. You are dismissed.